You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 114. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, my friend. Welcome to today's podcast, and thank you so much for joining me. I hope you are having a wonderful week, whether you're listening to this podcast when it goes live or at some point in the future. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're on a path and you have worked really, really hard to get to where you are? And even though it's a place where you thought you wanted to be, even though you're in a place where you know that there are people who would line up to be in your position, there are people who would love to have what it is that you have, even though you know all of these things, you feel like somehow you're just not on the right path. You might look at where you are and think about where you are going, and it conjures up questions and doubt and concerns. And yet, when you think about other alternatives that are available to you, you flirt with them. You think of them as almost like these plan Bs or these dreams that call to you, and yet they don't seem right. They seem unrealistic. They seem far-fetched. They seem way too risky. And so what ends up happening is you feel like you're stuck. You feel like you're on a path that you've chosen, and yet you're not really choosing it because you don't want to be there anymore. And there's this feeling of stuckness. And if that's something that you can relate to, whether it's at work, whether it's in some other aspect of your life, then today's episode is one that I think you will really resonate with. And what I'm really hoping for you to pull from today's episode is that you have more agency than you may be giving yourself credit for. And the way we're going to approach this is I'm actually going to offer you some ideas in terms of looking at this from the perspective of selling yourself on you. So the problem that I see in my practice when lawyers come to me and they are struggling and they feel stuck is that they find themselves in limbo, torn between two different options. So on the one hand, there's this path, and maybe you are on this path right now and it feels really safe. Maybe you have a position with a law firm or an organization. Maybe you're in-house. Maybe you've even gone so far as to create your own law firm. And you're on this path that feels safe. It feels like it's a position that you worked really, really hard for. It may be what you thought you always wanted. You feel like it's one that is coveted, that if other people had that opportunity, they would love that opportunity. You may even have people who ask you how it is you got to be in the place where you are at. And it may feel comfortable to you. And yet, even though you have this particular position, you keep questioning it. And you have these doubts. You try to imagine your future there and you cannot see it, or at least you cannot see a happy future. Maybe you look to others who are ahead of you in the organization. You look at their lives and you think, nobody here really has what I think I want for myself. And at the same time, you might have this pull, right? It's almost like this calling or this voice inside your head, and it's summoning you, right? It calls to you. It's questioning. It's telling you that there's something else that is out there for you that is better for you, that is more aligned with what you want. And yet when you start listening to that voice and you start imagining what that could look like, it might seem a little bit reckless. It might seem like you're throwing away what you've worked so hard to achieve. It might seem a little bit crazy to you. It might seem unrealistic. It might feel really unsafe. It may feel really unknown. And yet, when you allow yourself to listen to that voice, when you allow yourself to imagine what it would be like if you were to follow that thread, if you were to answer that calling, then you feel like you would be energized. You start to feel excited. You feel like it would almost be more peaceful, and it feels more true to you. It is what you feel like you truly want. So you may find yourself here where you're torn between the path that you're on that feels safe and predictable and that other path, right? That one, that mysterious, intriguing, but risky path that calls to you. Now, the reason this exists, the problem here, is that there's a tension between the external influences around you and what your internal GPS is telling you to do. So the external influences that you might find are influencing you at the moment may be cultural. It may be that your family has promoted a certain path and you are on that path and everybody is very content with that situation. It may be that within your organization or your firm, there's a very strong culture and you're very much embedded in that culture within your broader legal community. Your friends, your colleagues may all be on a similar path. And so you feel like there's a sense of belonging and that sense may be disrupted if you were to choose to do something else. Your friends may all be on similar paths. You may be inferring from your social group, from media, that what you're doing is what you should be doing. And yet, on the other hand, you may feel like there's just something that doesn't sit right with you. It's this nagging feeling in your gut. It's the fact that you keep questioning what you're doing. And so there's this real sense of conflict. And instead of taking the plunge and making a decision and moving on and going into that risky space, you quiet that voice inside of yourself and you promise yourself that you'll find a way to make it work where you are, to maintain the status quo. And that can work. Sometimes you can alter the path that you're on in such a way that it starts to align more with what it is that you truly desire. But if you're unable to create what it is that you want in the long run, it just doesn't seem to work. You may have pockets where you feel like everything is okay, or maybe it's tolerable enough, but then something happens and you're reminded of how unhappy you are, and then you feel like you're back where you started. And what this looks like is an ongoing internal battle where you're convincing yourself that you're exactly where you should be, that you should stay on the path that you're on, that things are going to get better, that you just need to give it a little bit more time. And that ultimately leads to increased discomfort because you realize things aren't really changing. In some ways, maybe they are improving. In other ways, they're not improving. It's possible that in some ways it's even getting worse. You may find that you're increasingly in a state of indecision. You have a really hard time committing to choices, new projects, because you feel like you're not fully committed. You're 1 foot in, you're 1 foot out. You may find that you increasingly procrastinate, whether it's on those decisions, whether it's on tasks at work, whether it's on doing those things that you know that you need to do in order to move forward. You may even have that escalate to a sense of dread where it's really just dreading going to work, for example, dreading getting on the call with the client, dreading taking on a new client, dreading taking on a new project. And what you can ultimately create there is this feeling of increased disconnection where you're disconnected from your work, you're disconnected from others. And sometimes what you may find is that you ultimately become disconnected from yourself. And so what I want to offer today is a different idea. What I want to offer you is the possibility of selling yourself on you, selling yourself on what you truly want. And there are 4 steps altogether. And as I go through each of these steps, what I would love for you to consider is how this applies for you. Because for each of you, this is going to feel different. It's going to relate to something different. And it may be a situation at work. It may be your professional life. It may be the career direction that you're going in. It may be a specific relationship within your organization. Maybe it's a client that you're working with. Maybe it's another lawyer, a colleague that you're working with. It may be something that's going on outside of the office. It may be a relationship in your personal life where you're feeling stuck, where you're feeling like you want to move on, but you don't really know if it's the right time, if you should do that. And so whatever it is that resonates for you as you're listening to today's podcast, I invite you to put yourself in this framework. I invite you to consider how this applies to you and to see how it can help you move from a state of feeling stuck, of feeling like you don't really want to act on what you want, to what it would be like if you were to do that. And there's no pressure to take any action because I know these decisions can feel really heavy. I have clients who I work with, and I know it can be really, really tough. But all I'm asking you to do today is just to invite the possibility to use your imagination to see if we can start shedding some light and opening the door to that possibility. So I mentioned there were 4 stages, and the first stage is to be honest with yourself about what it is that you actually want. This step, I think, may be one of the most difficult steps. And the reason that I say that is because sometimes I think we are almost frightened. We're almost scared to admit to ourselves that what we really want isn't what we are actually having. And it's so interesting to me because when I work with my clients, my coaching clients who come to me, and some of them have decisions that they want to make, it always astounds me. And I've said this on the podcast before, but often lawyers will come to me and they'll say, well, I'm not really happy with what I'm doing, but I really don't know what else I would want to do. And after a few minutes of discussion, they will often tell me exactly what it is that they want to do. And it's so interesting. And when I reflect it back to them, sometimes they accept that and sometimes they push it off. But there's this inner knowing, and we all have it. You have it. And so if you ask yourself what it is that you truly want, if it were a guaranteed success, if you lived in a perfect world, what is it that you would want? If you allow yourself to answer that question, then you will be able to have access to that inner GPS, that inner knowing. You'll know what it is that you are ultimately going to be seeking. So that's the first step, is to actually allow yourself to identify what it is that you truly want. And here I'll also offer that sometimes it can be really hard to say for sure what it is that you want, right? If you're looking at it from a career perspective, for example, if you're trying to identify a particular job, a job title that would satisfy what it is that you're looking for, you might have a hard time articulating that because you don't know of a particular job that satisfies what you're looking for. So what I'd invite you to do instead is to tap into, at a granular level, what it is that you like, what you desire, what feels fulfilling to you, what energizes you. So focus on that first. Now, once you have identified what it is that you want, I'm going to invite you to do kind of a neat exercise. And the reason that I'm articulating this exercise is I was listening to an audiobook the other day. I've been doing a lot of driving recently, and so I went to the library and I got these audiobooks, and one of them is all about selling. And there was this presentation by a gentleman named Zig Ziglar. I don't know if he's still alive, to be honest, and he's this American sales guy, and he has all these ideas about selling, and it was quite interesting. And this cassette, oh my gosh, this audio recording was very old because he was referring to cassette tapes. He's like, well, when you're selling, you should record yourself on a cassette player and play it back. And so I knew I was dealing with material probably going back to the 80s or 90s. But what was really interesting was he articulated the distinction between the price and the cost of an item. And to explain how he articulated it, he used the example of a bicycle. He said when he was younger, there was this bicycle that he wanted, and his parents did the math, and he could buy the bicycle new, and the price of the bicycle, again, the price for a new bicycle was $65. And to buy that same bicycle used was $35. So he talks about that being the initial price, right? $65 for the brand new bicycle, $35 for the used bicycle, or $30, whatever. And so yes, when you look at the price, and he said, at the time, a bicycle for a price of $65 just seemed outrageous. It was really, really expensive relative to what else was out there. And so in order to save on the price, his parents ended up buying this used bicycle, which was at basically half that initial price. But what happened is that used bicycle ended up needing repairs. First, the handlebars broke, and so they needed to be replaced. Then there was a trouble with the wheels, so the wheels needed to be replaced, and the pedal fell off, and etc. And you can see where the story is going. And so in the end, they ended up making the decision that after spending $20 odd on repairing this used bicycle and basically reaching the point where the price ended up being the same as the new bicycle, they ended up buying the brand new bicycle. So the distinction between the price and the cost, the price in this example was that heavy amount of money, right? We were looking at this only in the terms of the dollar value, but here's the price of the brand new bicycle. There's the price of the used bicycle, but what you also need to factor in is the cost. And so with that used bicycle, there also came the cost of the maintenance, the dealing with having to go back to the store and having the bicycle repaired, not being able to use the bicycle during the periods where the bicycle was being repaired. And so what I'm inviting you to consider here is that distinction, right? That upfront price versus the ongoing cost. And to draw this into an example that comes up with clients that I work with, I would like us to look at what that would look like if you were in a situation where you're trying to decide whether to leave one of these comfortable, coveted positions that you're in currently in exchange for doing something that is the unknown, something that you think that you want to do, but you're not quite sure. It seems risky, etc. So looking at the first example, or looking at that as an example, what is the price versus the cost? So the price of leaving may seem really high to you. This is why I think a lot of my clients stay where they are. That may be why you are staying where you are, because you're looking at the price of what it means to leave. It involves the immediate discomfort of leaving. That involves going out into the world and seeking a new position. When you do that, you may feel like that involves risk. It may involve a risk of people learning that maybe you're not as happy as people think you are in your current spot. What if the news gets back to your organization? These are real concerns. You may feel like if you do find a new position, then you're going to be disappointing people. You'll disappoint your colleagues who you may be leaving, who maybe you've worked with for a number of years. You may have really close relationships with them. You may be really concerned about how your departure will affect them. You may feel concerns about disappointing your clients. Again, you may have really long-standing relationships and not want to leave them. You might not want to leave them midway through a project, a file that you're working on with them. There's also that immediate pain that is almost like a breakup when you are in a position where you feel like it's really good. You recognize that this is a very wonderful opportunity that you're in currently, and you have these close connections, these relationships. It can almost feel like you have created a family around you. And so to leave is almost like a very painful breakup, almost like a death. And that is something that you're going to need to experience and manage if you make that choice. And of course, there's also the risk that you are effectively paying as part of that price, which is the risk of the unknown. You're giving up something that you have in exchange for something that you don't yet know. And that is really scary sometimes. So here you've got that price. It's like the price of the bicycle. It has a sticker shock. It's that $65 investment in the bicycle. And it may seem so daunting that your reaction is to walk away. It's simply too much for you to pay up front. And then you compare that to the cost of staying. So if you look at staying, so for example, let's say you are in a position, whether it's your current position, whether it's a particular relationship that you're in, whether it's a living situation. I mean, there are all sorts of situations that we can find ourselves in where they are uncomfortable, and yet we are accepting the cost of staying. So that might be ongoing rumination. Maybe you have a situation where you're continually coming back to it. You feel like you spend a lot of time thinking about it. You may find yourself complaining to your friends and loved ones about a particular situation. You may feel that sense of questioning where you are, that sense of disconnection with where you are. And along with that cost also comes the lost opportunity to make connections and progress in a different direction, a direction that is more aligned with what you want. If you go to that position, that job example, if you are in a job again that maybe you like it, but you've outgrown it and you're still there, that's where you're investing your energy relative to the possibility of being in a new position where your investment is going in line with the direction of where you want to be. You may also find that part of the cost is decreased performance. If you're not truly in and you're not truly out, you may find that you're not performing at a level that you would like to be performing at. You're, again, maybe feeling a bit indecisive. You might be procrastinating. You might be dreading the projects that you're on. You might find that there's an impact on your relationships outside of work. So if you are complaining to your friends, to your loved ones about what's happening, you're in this sense of rumination, you may be missing out on being present with them because your mind is always kind of going back to this question of, are you in the right place? So if you look at that used bicycle, yes, maybe you're sparing yourself the cost of the upfront investment of the $65, but it's kind of like you're on that bicycle, right? You're continuing to pay a price over time. You don't particularly love it. Every time you get on that bicycle, you're reminded that it wasn't the color that you really wanted. It wasn't the style that you really wanted. It's taking you more energy to maintain it than if you went ahead and bought the brand new bicycle. And every time you ride that bicycle, it's almost like you're telling yourself that you just didn't have the courage, the willingness, the whatever it is that you feel like you were missing that is requiring you to be on that used bicycle. So that's how I would invite you to think about that decision, to use that price versus cost analogy to analyze the situation that you're in right now. And you can do notes on this, right? You can sit down and you can ask yourself, what is the decision that I need to make here? What are the two options? And what is the relative price? And what is the relative cost? Now, this leads us to step 3. And what I'd invite you to do here is to simply choose your investment. Either way, you are making an investment in your time and your energy. And you may choose that right now, the investment that you want to make is to pay the cost. You may want the long-term expense, the cost of, in our example, staying, because that feels right to you. There may be periods in your life where there is significant disruption. This often happens when you have children. You bring them into the world and there is a lot that is going on there that means that you're willing to be in a situation where you may not be 100% aligned, but that's what you need in that moment because you simply don't have the capital available, the energetic, the emotional capital available to invest in the brand new bicycle. So that may be a conscious choice that you are making. There are other times too, whether it's your health, whether it's the health of those who are really close to you, there may be something else that's going on in your personal and professional life that merits you or warrants you choosing to stay where you are, even though you know that it's not necessarily aligning with what it is that you truly want. It may also be that you have made that decision that you know you're not on the right path, but you haven't been able to articulate what it is that you do truly want. And I've worked with lawyers who are in this position where they know that the path that they're on isn't right, but they still haven't figured out what it is that they want to go to next. And so if you're there, then I would just invite you to choose that on purpose, to make that a conscious decision and to know what it is that you are waiting for or looking for. Is there a timeline that you're putting on that? Is there something that you're doing in the interim to learn more about yourself, to learn more about what it is that you want? So that may be a choice that you're making. Now, the other choice that you might make, and that is a choice that we're exploring in more detail in today's episode, which is the idea of making that larger upfront investment, paying that higher price, and in exchange, going after what it is that you want, whether that is going after the job you love or some other decision. And what you will find there is that the investment that you're making will allow you to move faster, and it will allow you to free yourself from the rumination and create peace of mind around the decision that you're making. Now, if you decide to go this route, if you decide to choose to go after what you want, then you may need to do this next step, which is to sell yourself on yourself. Yes, you will need to sell yourself on yourself. And I'm going to give you a few ideas on how you can do that. Number one is to get clear on what it is that you're selling yourself on. Get clear about what it is that you want. And once you've done that, then you're going to want to commit to paying the price. Now, if you've ever had that experience where you buy a large ticket item on your credit card, for example, there's almost like this thrill / fear / dread / oh gosh, what am I doing? When you press the purchase button online. This is what happens to me. And I know this happens to others. I know I'm not alone in this. And so you almost want to get yourself into that feeling state when it comes to making your decision. And that's because you're going to appreciate in the moment the significance of what it means to make that decision. So you commit to paying the price, whether that is being okay that you may disappoint people. It may be letting go with opportunities that you know you're in line for, but that don't truly align with what it is that you want. You may know that you're going to disrupt certain relationships, that you might lose certain relationships, and you make peace with that potential price. I also invite you to think about the objections. So what you'll notice is that when you make that choice, when you decide to go down that path, to pursue what it is that you truly want, you may find that all of a sudden you are faced with all the reasons internally about why that is a terrible decision. What is wrong with that decision? Whether it's too risky, whether it's too difficult, whether you have feelings of self-doubt about being able to do it. And I want you to notice each of these obstacles because they are great learning. Your next job is going to be to write down all of those obstacles and then find your way through them. Find how you're going to make peace with them, how you're going to overcome them. And then finally, I invite you to have faith in yourself. Probably the biggest piece when it comes to selling yourself and on what it is that you want is to have faith that number one, you can trust yourself, that you are leading yourself in the right direction for you. What you choose may be different from what others are choosing for themselves or what others would choose for you. But when you're fully aligned with your inner GPS, that is the path for you. And so I invite you to have faith in yourself, faith that you are making the right decision, faith that you have the strength, the skill, the capability to pursue what it is that you want, and faith that you deserve to have this choice. You deserve to be a person who chooses what you truly want. Now, either way, whether you choose to go after what you want or choose to stay maybe in a situation that is not exactly what you want, but it's what you're choosing for the moment, then you are investing, and you're investing on purpose. You have made a conscious choice. And when you decide, if you decide that what you truly want is to make that investment and choose yourself to pay that short-term higher price in exchange for what you truly, truly want, what you will need is a willingness to bet on yourself. You will need to be willing to experience the discomfort of taking on the risk, taking on the responsibility, and to take on the unknown. And when you do that, when you choose what it is that you truly want, you'll find your way out of stuckness. You will find your way out of rumination, and you will find yourself on a path of clarity. And I'm not saying that it will be an easy path. It may be a rocky, uncertain, and unpredictable path. But when you are guided by that inner GPS, by that calling that is telling you, right, that is calling you in a particular direction, you will feel a sense of freedom, a sense of peace, and a sense of forward momentum that will carry you through. So my friend, I have had such a wonderful time speaking with you today. I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. Just a quick recap. What we covered was to be honest with yourself about what it is you truly want, I invite you to look at the short-term price versus the long-term cost of making the decision that is weighing on you. I invite you to choose your investment on purpose, whether that is to stay or whether it is to go. And then I invite you to choose, if you choose, what you want to sell yourself on yourself. Namely, be clear about what it is that you want. Commit to paying whatever that price might be. Notice your objections and find a way to make peace with them. And then finally, have faith in yourself. So with that, my friend, I wish you a wonderful week, and I look forward to reconnecting with you again soon. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.